Good evening. This evening we are going to talk about smashing idols and seeking the Lord. I'd like to start with a story. A few weeks ago, my friend and I were walking down the street together. We were walking and talking. And it was dark and fairly late in the evening. Now, this friend is a dear brother, and he loves to ask good questions and to say things that make people think. And he's very helpful in my life, causing me to think through things more deeply. And hopefully someday soon you guys will get to meet him. But anyway, we were walking along, enjoying the evening, just talking about normal things. And we were walking past a house of worship that had an idol, a statue set up in the front yard. And he pointed to that and he said, "Sometime we should bring some spray paint and paint that thing." And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And I felt incredulous, but also intrigued at the same time. And he said, "Yeah, don't you remember a few weeks ago we were walking the same way and you were talking about tearing down idols?" And I did a quick rewind in my mind, and oh yeah, we were. See, if you read through the Old Testament again and again, you see stories. Such and such a king feared the Lord, and he would tear down idols. Then another king would come along and I would say, he did not fear the Lord, and he would set the idols back up, and he would allow people to set idols up. Then the next king would come along who feared the Lord, back and forth. So I've been telling my friend a few weeks ago how I felt like we as Christians need to be identifying the idols in our lives today and tearing them down just like the kings were before. And so that's what he was referring to. And he's like, well, how serious should we take it? Shouldn't we be this forceful in taking down idols? And I said, but a few days later, I had a thought that was very intriguing. And so I'd like to share with you about that later on in the video. But first, I'd like to talk about what is idolatry. What are idols? And idolatry is just the act of worshiping an idol. And David Clarkson was a puritan minister who lived during the 16th century. And he wrote a little book titled "Soul Idolatry Excludes Men from Heaven." And I don't think I can say it better than him, so I'm just going to read what he says. Clarkson says, quote, "There are two sorts of idolatry. Open, outward idolatry, when men, out of a religious respect, bow to or prostrate themselves before anything besides the true God. This is the idolatry of the heathen, and in part, the idolatry of the papists. 2. Secret and soul idolatry, when the mind is set on anything more than God, when anything is more valued than God, more desired than God, more sought than God, more loved than God. Then is that soul worship, which is due only to God. Hence, secret idolaters shall have no inheritance in the kingdom of God. Soul idolatry will exclude men out of heaven as well as open idolatry. He who serves his lust is as incapable of entering heaven as he who worships of wood or stone." End quote. What is your mind on the most? What makes your eyes light up? What do you really enjoy talking about? All these things point to your God, to your idol. So 2 responsibilities that I believe every believer in Jesus has. And these responsibilities are carried out in 2 different arenas of our life. So the first responsibility that we have as believers in Jesus is to physically take hold of idols, to tear them down, to destroy them, to refuse to live and work in a place where idols are worshipped. That's in one arena of our life. And the other responsibility that we have in another area of our life is to warn, to plead, and reason with people to turn away from idolatry and to worship the only true God. So going back to our story, a few days after my friend and I had our talk and he asked that question, I was reading again in Second Chronicles. I was reading the story of Asa, and he was a good king who feared the Lord. It says Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God, for he removed the altars of the foreign gods and the high places, and broke down the sacred pillars, and cut down the wooden images. He commanded Judah to seek the Lord God of their fathers. So this was a good king who was tearing down these idols. I was thinking, should we actually be physically taking our hands and tearing down idols around us? And this is what came to mind. It kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, which may not be a good metaphor to use when we're talking about tearing down idols. But anyway, we are in one arena, one area of our life, supposed to take a hold of things, to say either this idol goes or I go. And the area of our life that we do that in is in the area where we are a leader, where we are the authority. And every one of us is the authority in one most important area, and that is of our own lives. So each of us has to start with ourselves, probably the most painful place to start, in seeking out idols and in physically removing them, not just feeling bad about them, not just thinking we should change, but physically tearing them out, refusing to allow them in our lives. If you're a father, if you're a parent, you have a family, you're responsible as the leader where there are idols in your family to not just encourage and warn, but to physically make sure that there are no idols that your family is worshiping. If you're a pastor, you are called for your congregation to physically identify idols, whether it's an idol that we're actually physically worshiping or an idol of the mind, an idol of the soul, as David Clarkson talks about. To identify those and to physically remove them, not just preach against them, not just feel bad about them, but to say, in this situation, either these idols go or I go. There has to be ground that we will die on, and a godly leader has to take the responsibility. They have the responsibility, whether they will take the initiative or not, to get rid of any idols in your organization. If you're a king or a president listening, which the likelihood of that is not very high, but you have a responsibility, if you are God-fearing, to get rid of the idols that are destroying your nation and the people of your nation. However far our sphere of influence and authority goes is how far we need to physically take charge and remove idols. And the second arena that all of us have as well is the arena where we are not the authority, so that's for our friends, for our neighbors, for our country, for the people around us. And we are responsible. We can't just say, oh, I'm not the authority here, so I'm just going to be silent and let the idols continue. No, all through the years, there have been prophets and preachers and men and women of God who warned, who pleaded, and who reasoned with people to turn away from idolatry and to worship the only true God. And we need to do this because, first of all, we have a burning love for God. That's the first and greatest commandment, right? Love the Lord with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind. And when we do that, we will be sick, and we cannot stand to see a culture of people worshiping false gods, idols. And we are called to do that because we love people. The second commandment is to love our neighbors as ourselves, right? We know that not only are people who worship idols, not only can they not experience the blessing of God, but they are also going to incur the wrath of a holy God. So out of a love for God, out of a love for people, we should be warning and pleading with the people around us to turn away from their idols, whether it's physical idols or idols of the soul. So going back here to the story of Asa, I'd like to just conclude with one thought about the importance of tearing down idols, and with that, seeking the Lord. And Asa, his life didn't all turn out real great, but the first part of his life is a real example in this area. So after he took down all the idols and commanded Judah to worship the Lord, then it goes on to describe how God blessed their country, the territory of Judah, how they had plenty of food, how they had big cities and a good army. But then another army came against them. And you know what Asa did? He sought the Lord. When this army was against them, Asa didn't just say, we've torn down our idols. We're in good standing with God, so we can do this on our own. Asa went, and this is what he said when they were confronted with this huge army. He said, Lord, it is nothing for you to help, whether with many or with those who have no power. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rest on you, and in your name we go against this multitude. O Lord, you are our God. Do not let men prevail against you. So friend, tonight, I'd like you to notice that last thing that I read there. Do not let men prevail against you. This is what Asa was saying to God. Is your life, is my life, so in tune with God, so caught up in worshiping him that when the devil attacks us, when opposition comes against us, it's as if it's coming against God? Or are we involved with secret idols in our soul that make us apart from God, so that if the devil attacks you, if the devil attacks us, that it's not that he's attacking God and his work, but he's just attacking you, human. So I'd like to encourage us to tear down our idols, to recognize them, to be brutally honest. And idols are something that are so close to our hearts. When something holds that position in our life, it's very easy to become defensive, even in our mind, if someone would even mention that it's an idol. But if you start getting defensive about something, that may be a good sign that it is an idol in your life that you need to take to the Lord and confess and tear down. So, leaders, be the leader. Put yourself on the line. Either the idol goes or you go out of the organization or get killed, which probably for most of us, it'll just mean having a bad image. But that's the kind of people we are called to be, getting rid of our idols and seeking the Lord. So thank you for watching. God bless you.